Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session entitled Industrial Intensification of London. I'm Andy Harding, Head of Clients within JLL's Industrial and Logistics Group, and I will be chairing this session. I am truly excited to introduce four absolute trailblazers within this exciting new sector and who are making big strides to bring forward new schemes into the marketplace which will accommodate a huge variety of occupiers. More to follow on that. I'd like to introduce firstly Jonathan Langham. Jonathan is Head of Development at Be First Regeneration Limited, who are the regeneration development arm of the London Borough of Barking and Dagenham. Hugely proactive and strong supporters of industrial intensification, their Industria scheme has just been completed and is the first of its type in London, providing four stories of industrial warehouse and creative spaces totalling 45 units. Next, Sophie Draker. Sophie is Associate Director at SEGRO. As many as you know, SEGRO have been at the forefront of promoting the need for intensification projects in London for some considerable time now. And indeed, I have been privileged to have travelled with them on a few fact-finding missions to Europe and further afield. Thank you, SEGRO. Their schemes have been hugely well received, resulting in their first scheme in partnership with St George, getting close to completion in Park Royal, known as SEGRO V Park Grand Union. Sophie is leading this project, and know we will get some insight into it in more detail shortly. It is a 6-storey scheme providing 110,000 square feet of commercial space, of which 2 floors are a deck car park and also has a roof terrace. Currently, the scheme will comprise 20 units in a range of sizes up to 33,000 square feet on a single floor plate. Mike Best, Head of Logistics at British Land. British Land have also been hugely busy in this arena with 2 sites in South East London, both in for planning, with one due to hopefully receive planning very shortly. And they also, British Land also have a very exciting space known as the Box at Paddington, which can provide up to 150,000 square feet, which is superbly located to accommodate particularly the last mile market. Finally, and by no means least, my colleague Tessa English. Tessa is the head of JLL's Urban and City Logistics team and who has lived and breathed this market sector for the last 4 years, travelling extensively, exploring best practice and bringing those ideas back to the UK. You're all welcome and many thanks for giving up your time today. We really want this session to be as interactive as we can, so we would encourage you to post your questions on Slido, and I think there's a reference up there, so please do that. In addition, we are going to have a roving mic, so please don't be shy. Do ask some questions, if you do ask a question from the audience, if you could say who you're from, your name and who you're from, that would be marvellous. We're going to try and structure it so we're going to have sort of 20 minutes for questions at the end. So start thinking of those questions. But by way of background, before we sort of start, I thought I'd just give a little bit of colour here. This is a massively evolving market with a variety of unique schemes being considered or implemented at present. Broadly, the types of schemes fall into 4 main categories. What we are calling multi-level, which is cargo lift access only to the upper floors. Multi-storey, which is vehicle ramp access up to the upper floors. Then hybrid buildings, and we'll hear a lot more from Jonathan about Industria in a moment, which are a combination of both lifts and ramps. And then we have the co-location solution, which is amalgamating both industrial space with another user, mainly residential. In total, and this is where I think this is quite staggering, there are circa 80 schemes at various stages of evolution within the M25 and indeed closer into the city and the West End as we speak today, which I think is staggering. Before we get into questioning our panel, I have asked Tessa if she could give us an overview as to the main drivers as to why intensification in London has come to the forefront and why the industrial landscape in London is going through a huge renaissance and change. So if I could ask you, Tessa, to
yep, you can, of course.
To give us some insight.
Thanks, Andy. So I'm going to touch on some things that probably you're all aware of, but it's when you then combine them all together you start to think actually why we've got so much pressure on land in London and particularly pressure on industrial land. So when you look at the forecasts going forward in terms of population growth, London is looking like it's going to get to over 10 million people by 2040. And when you start looking at the population density now, it's pretty high. It's over 5,000 people per square kilometre. London's population density stands out against every other city across the UK, and actually you start to compare London with other major cities across the world globally. So you're thinking about Paris and other places. Not quite as high density as Asia, where, I mean, I think some cities you've got over 10, 11, 12,000 people per square kilometre. But that's those cities where we're actually seeing industrial intensification because there is that land supply constraint. When you factor in London's growing population, and this is something that's been touched on probably a lot today in other sessions, there's that need to build more houses to cater for London's growing population. But what we've actually seen is in the last 10 years or so, last 15 years, actually we go back to 20 years, where we've been, stats have been recording the amount of industrial land that has been lost in London. That land has predominantly been lost because we're building more homes, and those homes have been built on industrial land. So we've seen over 1,500 hectares of industrial land lost in London in the last 20 years, which is massive. We also speak to our Resi team a bit, and they've actually given us some stats on the number of homes that have been built in the last 10 years, and it's probably averaged over 10,000 homes per year in London, but it's nowhere near the targets that are being set to be built in London. So we're already at that stage where we've got pressures on land in terms of supply, but we need to build more homes, and there is that pressure on the land that is left. And then when you think about why do we need industrial land in London, well, we need it to service London. So probably everything that was used for this event today went through a warehouse to help cater for it. And there's massive pressure on London, and there's just not really, you know, the stock is diminishing and it's not there. And then when you think about e-commerce, and everyone shops online, I think that came into the forefront during the lockdown, where probably everyone in the room dabbled in a little bit of online shopping. Those numbers and that percentage has really increased in the last few years. I think we're probably going to average around about 25% of total retail sales will be online in the UK this year. That's £1 in every £4 that's spent. So again, that is an increasingly large number. And people are also wanting things quicker. So there's that demand for same day and next day delivery, which also implicates where you put a warehouse. And you think about London's population and where that demand's coming from in e-com as well. And then, so that takes us, if you think about that as the demand side, the supply with the loss of land, then we're now seeing why in the London plan there is that policy that's been put in place to protect the industrial land that is left, and the policy that's encouraging industrial intensification. So that's kind of why we've got to where we are, Andy.
Thanks, Tess. I just want to ask one other question going on from that presumably the economic, demographic, environmental characteristics that we're experiencing now in London, they've been faced by major cities globally already. You know, why do you think that effectively we in London are so far behind other cities? I mean, for instance, I think in Munich there's 10 intensified schemes already up and built.
Yeah, so we've, as you mentioned earlier on, we've done a tiny bit of fact-finding and looked at some intensified industrial schemes across Europe, and actually we've been to Germany. And what was really interesting that we saw there was actually there was, I suppose you could say, some government intervention in the sense that the municipals of the cities in Germany were helping to fund these schemes. They realised that they need to also boost job growth within their cities, and that's where we were seeing that intensification come forward. So we're starting to see that now as well in London, but I think it's some of the government intervention that has come forward, and that's why, you know, some cities across Europe we've seen it a bit more, and particularly there's been more government intervention in Asia in terms of dictating what's built, which just hasn't happened here yet.
Thank you. Well, that's sort of neatly, without being too prescribed there, brings us neatly on to Jonathan. Obviously, Jonathan, in your capacity at BFIRST, I mean, you have fantastic news, PC'd industry a few weeks ago. Can you just give everyone some insight as to how the scheme is being received in the market? Obviously, this is the first of its kind. soon to be soon to have others coming through. But what sort of type of occupiers are looking at the space? And I am hearing that you've got some space under offer already, which obviously is really positive for the market as a whole.
Yeah. If you'll just indulge me, I might give a bit of context in terms of why we're the first. We're the first because we've been helped. So fundamentally, the JLA set this out as an ambition and gave us grant funding to do the design, which is why Industrial looks as good as it does in terms of the quality of the architecture. The other big benefit that we've had is the land that it sits on has been in our portfolio for quite some time. So basically the land's gone in for free. And that's why we can deliver a product that perhaps colleagues here are waiting a little longer before they can. But as Tessa says, the reason for it is we're a borough, we're losing a lot of our industrial land. We've got a very ambitious housing trajectory that our leader wants to build more houses than the London plan actually asks us to do. So as a consequence of that, we need to find more land. And the only way we can do that is recycle what we've got more efficiently. But to answer the question, so we launched in September. We've had our agents launch day, which was generally well received. We're retaining Jones Lang and Lambert Smith as our leasing agents. Knight Frank are doing the property management for us. We had a full house for the launch day, and you're more than welcome to make contact with us if other people want to come round. And we're part of the open house process. There was some viewings last week. It is an impressive building, and personally I like the product because my frustration when I came into the team was we need to intensify, and I think the typology we had at that point was beds and sheds, and I definitely don't like beds and sheds, and I definitely like intensification because we've got the benefits where we're doing good industrial floor space for industrial occupiers, not the compromise of shoehorning industrial occupiers into residential schemes. So I think hopefully this is a way forward, it's a way to solve the problem. In terms of where we are at the moment, we've had our agents on board for a couple of months. We've got 5 units away so far. The interesting point there is that for the audience who might not know, so we're 100,000 square foot over 4 floors. 70% of the floor space is larger units between sort of 10 and 15,000 square foot for traditional sheds. And then the rest of it is creative space, so anywhere between 800 and 1,500 square foot. All the interest we've had so far has been for the smaller units. Now, from my point of view, that's frustrating because I want to get the big space away because that's the expensive stuff and that's what generates rental income for us. But in terms of proof of the concept, I think it's been quite useful in terms of the idea always was it was meant to be an incubator, and it is those creatives that are coming in looking for managed floor space, that easy in, easy out lease terms. So I think that product has been received well. The tension our team have got is we've got 100,000 square foot, so we might be doing 4,000 square foot a month for next year. So back to you, Tess.
No pressure.
I'll get my coat. You just mentioned, Jonathan, about beds and sheds, and I know that we had a conversation about this the other day, and I know you've got some experience with them. You obviously are not a great fan of them, but do you think there is a long-term solution for them, or do you think that it just in practice is just difficult to implement that conflict between the two?
I think it's a range of typologies for different solutions. If I give a bit of background, so Industria sits in strategic industrial land, as does the whole of Thames Road, which is our big regeneration scheme. Thames Road was downgraded from strategic industrial to locally significant industrial, and the premise of that was that sort of if there was no net loss, it was okay. So effectively, you're just changing the type of floor space, but you're keeping the quantum. And the design solution for that really was beds and sheds. So residential podiums, you put all your open space on the podium, and you've got commercial units at ground floor. Now that's fine if it's sort of quasi-retail floor space, sort of gyms, nurseries, coffee shops, that sort of stuff. But when you've got traditional metal bashers running 24/7, making an awful racket with ventilation issues. That's not a solution. And from a management perspective, we don't really want that type of heavy industry in Industria, but at least in terms of a typology, it's more able to accommodate those dirtier, noisy, more intensive uses than the beds and sheds concept. So I think, to answer the question, it's horses for courses, but I think it'll be interesting over the next few years to optimise that hybrid between vehicle ramps and good lifts and then unit sizes, in terms of really marrying where your operators are in terms of what sizes they want, what their just-in-time delivery mechanisms are. Because the interesting thing we've got with Industria is it's one space per unit and one service turning head per unit. So on a Monday morning, it's going to be quite busy. And it'll be a management-intensive process to get that to work, because as soon as someone puts a pallet down in someone else's turning bay, the whole thing's going to grind to a halt. So it's going to be a different model in terms of it's going to have to be very much a managed estate. And I think the idea really is to sort of create that estate fever thing, in terms of you don't mind paying a bit of a premium because you know there's a caretaker or facilities manager that will look after you, will help you out, will sort of hold your delivery trucks until you're ready to deliver them. So I think intensification is really good, and I think it's just tweaking that model in terms of the ramps and the lifts.
I think things are going to evolve, aren't they, over time, as best practice is sort of really established. Just coming on to Sophie, Z-Grade V Park Grand Union is on site, PCs early next year. Now, obviously, V Park, vertical park, is a vertical industrial estate. What do you think that the alternative experiences for a customer are going to be over a traditional horizontal industrial estate?
So V Park is a little bit different to Industria in that it's going to be access to the upper floors by goods lift only, so no access via ramps. That means we've got a shared service yard, shared loading and shared goods lifts, which our customers will be able to book via an app. And that customer experience piece is really critical in terms of delivering a building like this and making it a success. How do we create a building that people want to come and work at every day? How do we create a building that our customers want to invite their clients to come and visit them at? And in many ways, our V Park building draws upon the experience of the office sector, particularly in terms of things like amenities. So for example, at our building, we've got things such as a roof terrace with amazing views, bookable meeting rooms, breakout space, cycle storage and parking. We've got a concierge at reception to welcome visitors. And it sounds basic, but just being able to get a decent coffee on site. In a traditional industrial estate, we hear this come up all the time. Employees have nowhere to go at lunchtime just to grab a sandwich or a coffee, so even that is really important. Fortunately for us, our V Park building sits as part of a much wider residential kind of co-location scheme, because we're delivering V Park, as you said, Andy, in partnership with St George. So our customers will also benefit from the amenities that go with that residential development, things like cafes, a grocery store, a gym, again, all things that typically you wouldn't benefit from on a normal industrial estate. And the other thing is clustering. This is a building within which a customer can come in and take a small space and potentially then upsize in a couple of years to a larger unit without much hassle, because you're staying within the same building. But there are a number of sectors which really benefit from being able to co-locate things like film and media, where they really feed off each other, the networking opportunities. So it's a different type of space. In some cases, it will appeal to a slightly different type of occupier, I think, but really exciting.
And so just going on from that, I mean, obviously one of, on the occupiers' wish list at the moment, other than what you've just described, collaboration areas, it's the ESG agenda, which I'm sure has been referred to many times today already. At V Park, are there certain measures that you're incorporating, particularly on the E and the S? Are there significant, or are there specific measures that you're including in the scheme?
So obviously ESG is very high on our agenda, and for St George, our JV partner. So on the environmental side, we're delivering things like PV panels on the roof, electric vehicle charging. Pretty much every unit will benefit from access to a space that has an EV charger. air source heat pumps, again, cycle storage to encourage people to get to work in an environmentally friendly way. But I don't want to forget, of course, the social side. We've had regard to well principles in terms of designing the space. I've already mentioned things like the amenities, but also just things like copious natural light. You know, this building should add to the people that work there's well-being, not detract from it. So that's in terms of people that are working at the building, but then what does the scheme do for the local people? And in terms of job creation and support, the scheme should support 300 jobs once it's up and running. But while construction is still ongoing, 41% of the team on site are from a 10-mile radius of the building. So it's, again, job creation and creating opportunities for local people.
Thank you. Turning to Mike. Hi, Mike. You're obviously in for planning for a couple of very exciting schemes in South East London at the moment. Just a bit about traffic generation, which obviously is quite a topic that is within that intensification space. How have you looked at trying to sort of mitigate undoubted concerns for increased traffic flow in and around the sites?
Yeah, no problem. Well, I mean, obviously, a logistics building generates traffic because you've got goods coming in and coming out. So we do have regards to that when we're sort of designing the building. But I think one of the key things about these spaces is we're not necessarily introducing new traffic. It's goods and vans and delivery vehicles that are already there. Just because we've been losing that industrial space, like Tessa said, it's at the moment it's coming in from further out of London. And so some of our schemes, particularly one at Paddington, we commissioned some research by UCL, and we were able to show that by actually moving that delivery hub closer to the delivery point and the city centre, we can reduce the total vehicle mileage and potentially take some vehicles off the road. Also, by having the hub close to your delivery point, it opens up new vehicles for the final leg of the journey. So yes, you can deliver by van, but you can also deliver by cargo bike and possibly by pedestrians as well. And so as part of this research, they looked at that and they found that delivery by cargo bike can reduce up to 90% of the carbon for every parcel that's delivered. And so at our schemes, that's what we're looking to do. We're trying to encourage that and build that into the design as well. And particularly at Paddington, which is a mixed-use scheme. It sits under our office campus there. It's mainly cargo-based for outbound delivery, and we can take up to 100 vans off the roads of Westminster.
That's great innovation as well on the cargo bike side, Mike. So just stepping back a moment, you've obviously got Industria and V Park storming ahead. You know, one's completed, one's about to be completed. You've got a little bit of time on your side in terms of, you know, I think that it's fair to say that everyone is very focused on this market, and there's a lot of sharing of information. The three of you I know beforehand were chatting. You've got a bit of time to just analyse how, you know, Segro and BFirst have delivered these two buildings. Have you got things already you're thinking about over and above what is already been provided, you know, particularly on that environmental and social again? Is there other elements that you're working on? You might not want to tell us all of there might be some secrets there, but you know, are there things that you're working on now? I mean, you know, cargo bikes is one which I know we talked about in Paddington, but you know, are there other things that you're looking at? Right?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, I think a lot of the best practices for actually developing the building are reasonably well understood, and you know, Segro are doing a great job. BFirst are doing a great job, including PV panels, LED lighting, all the things you'd expect from a big reputable developer. But like I said, we're trying to look beyond our own carbon and think about the impact that we're having on the wider supply chain and how we can help facilitate savings there. And also, as we look to build buildings that are not only great for our customers, but great for the communities that they sit within. And that's probably more keenly felt when you're in an urban environment, because there's more people interacting with it. Even if you're not delivering a mixed-use schemes, there are lots of surrounding uses. And so, again, another sort of a benefit of being at BL is that as we introduce logistics into our standing assets, we already have active social programs in those communities that we can give the logistics occupiers access to. So, for example, at Paddington, it's got a really well-established social programme. It helps with reading for young children in the community. There's a training and development programme for the employees. So it's something that we already have that we're just opening up to a broader audience.
That's fantastic. That's great. I'm just looking at the clock, and we've got 20 minutes to go. Do we have any questions from the audience? If I'm looking to see if I can see anyone with their hands up. Does anyone want to ask any questions with the roving mic? A gentleman over there. Thank you. Got two. Thank you. Oh, three.
Hello.
Hi.
Matt Sheridan, McLaren Construction, so have a vested interest in Industria. So it's good to hear the comment about it getting PC. Having been there and seen the scheme, and it is really impressive what Be First have done down in Barking, but also having listened to the leader of the council down there, what's the panel's view in terms of responding to this driving further up with industrial units, building higher rather than building out, and actually therefore reducing the footprint, which is what Jonathan has explained, part of the driver behind what they're doing down at Barking with Industria. How can you encourage private developers to go higher up so that frees up land for other uses? And what else do you need to do with taller industrial buildings? What other challenges do you need to address?
Anyone who wants to take that
I'm happy to
question?
start.
Sophie?
I guess for us at SEGRO, the first step is deliver this building, and that's kind of a test case, isn't it? See what the challenges are and take it from there. We're absolutely committed to the multi-storey sphere, and there'll be a lot of lessons to be learned from that, and I'm sure, as your example of private developers, they'll be looking to see how these sort of buildings go, and the proof will be in the pudding, really.
Should I add a bit on as well? I was just
Yes.
going to say that Andy mentioned at the beginning that we as a team are monitoring schemes, intensified schemes that are being considered in London. We've probably got a list of over 80 at the moment. So people are looking at it, I think, and they're considering it. And some of the advice we've been given, particularly when you're going up, is there are different options of what you could build. And so you could do a ramped warehouse. You could do a warehouse with cargo lifts to go up. You have to think about the type of occupier that's going to go into that building as well, as to what type of space you deliver. You have to think about the plot size that you actually have, and so what you could deliver as well, and the local demand in the market. And I think probably it's great that we've got two schemes on site, one built, one about to complete soon, and we know Mike's going to come forward with a few more. And I think, and probably from what Jonathan said, no pressure on the letting, but letting the buildings and showing that people are going to take them and will use them will help that encouragement to see some more schemes coming forward. I had a call on Industria yesterday and a potential occupier, and they were like, this is a fantastic building, and they really liked it. It's a brand new scheme, excellent product, well specified in the market, and Be First really did their research into the type of space that they needed to build, the size of units they needed to build, because there just aren't really that quality of stock and those size of units in that market. So I think there's a number of factors to look at, but I think hopefully when we see these two up and let, we'll see more coming forward as well.
And it's also about, like, in other markets where that concept has already been sort of proven, multi-storey logistics is really well established. There are different pressures in different markets, and Hong Kong, which is obviously extremely land constrained. I think Goodman have a 22-storey building, so it works. But we have to prove the concept and also see how London evolves in terms of population, in terms of the green belt. Even in the best scenario, logistics is never going to be better than like the third most important thing, and see what that means for land values and industrial rents to make the economics work.
And there are some occupiers for whom multi-storey buildings might not be quite suitable, particularly ones with a lot of deliveries. So there's a danger in thinking that all industrial will become multi-stories. It won't replace everything.
No.
The bit I'd quite like to add to that is that within our borough, we've got this sort of massive housing trajectory we need to deal with, and that's all coming off industrial stock, so we need to sort of intensify. So basically, we've gone around the borough and looked to see if we can replicate an industria. And basically, to do it well, you really need to start with a 10-acre site. And there's only two 10-acre, well, there were 3 10-acre sites in the borough until the City of London bought the other one. And there lies the problem. To be able to sort of do that well, you really need a really big site to get it to work. And you know, London's an urban area, isn't it? So trying to find those regeneration sites is quite difficult. One thing I found quite interesting in terms of there was one team within Be First that dealt with the construction and the procurement side of it, and my team came in to do the leasing and the longer term asset management. I think if there'd been more collaboration earlier on through the process with the leasing team and our FM team, we could have been a bit cleverer in terms of hardwiring some of the kit within the building, which would have some efficiencies. And I think in terms of sort of going to the ESG point, it's really easy to put an obligation on a contractor to recruit locally and fund local schemes and all the rest of it. But that's the tip of the iceberg. These buildings are going to be here for 50, 100 years. It's their long-term carbon footprint or social impact that's important, not just the construction bit. So I think to solve that, it's about being BREEAM excellent. It's about having PV cells that basically means that the building runs itself. It's doing ground source heat pumps, which means it heats itself. It's all that stuff that works. And then I suppose in terms of, to answer the question in terms of can we go much higher, I suppose the difficulty there is every time you go higher, your piling's more expensive. And yeah, we're at this tipping edge in terms of we've all got to get to £35 a square foot before this works, unless there's a whole stack of public subsidy coming in. So I think that's going to be where the dilemma is in terms of there'll be a glass ceiling because there'll be a finite number of operators that will cope with ramps, a finite number of operators that will cope with service yards that are sub-optimum. But I think it's horses for courses, isn't it? There's probably enough products and occupiers out there to fit everybody. And if we can really crack this bit and do less beds and sheds, then I think we'd all be happier bedfellows, I think.
Does that answer your question? Yeah. Partly. Good. Well, see everyone later and then until they give you a bit more insight. We had 2 other questions. We've got loads of Slido questions, but we've got 12 minutes. So should we just do the 2 other questions that we had in the audience, and then I can run through some of these, please. Thank you.
Hi, Vince Shields, JLL, Design for Management. I'm dealing with a lot of office buildings in central London where there's a requirement for consolidated deliveries, Section 1 and 6s. Does that influence the design that you're doing in terms of a multi-storey side? And the second part of the question is, are you seeing local authorities come to you and say, can you fit that into your design to actually deliver that?
Well, I think from our side, the Section 106 stuff with office buildings is really, at the moment, it's constrained to the office itself, right? It's not going sort of beyond that. It's a requirement to deliver that office. We definitely see that as a source of demand for our market. And we think about, where our buildings will be. So as British Land, if we want to deliver an office, how can we ensure that, if we need it, we can do the consolidation ourselves? But I guess that's probably a little bit unique to us. Generally, I'd say as a market, we see that just as a source of demand coming forward.
Can we, the lady at the back was asking a question as well in the middle, just to the right. Could we get a mic to her as well, please? Thank you very much. It's got to be a good question now.
Thank you. I've got 2. Am I allowed to?
Great, you can indeed.
Pippa Guterbock, London Borough of Haringey. The first question is about financing. Public finances are in a particular position at the moment where investment in infrastructure like this is becoming increasingly challenging. And you cited a few examples of major investment in industrial intensification here and abroad, which were underpinned by public finances. I'd be interested to know what the panel thinks about where this particular sector is headed, given that that lack of public finances. The second question is about rail. Interested to know whether or not you think there's an opportunity to increase or intensify rail-connected industrial to remove trucks off roads in inner cities, particularly for last mile logistics, and what research or examples you've got of this in London or elsewhere.
Well, certainly, Tess, I'm going to put you on the spot because in Paris there is a rail connected scheme, isn't there?
Yes.
La Chapelle,
Yeah.
which is the only
Another
one I can think
visited,
of. Yeah. That's the only one I can think of, which is an intensified scheme.
Yeah, that's a. It's called. It was called like a logistics city or something like that. But it's got a rail siding within the space. We visited it in 2019, and actually the rail wasn't live at the time. But there was a rail siding, and then Chronopost, DPD were operating inside the space as well. And then it was a part of a much wider mixed-use development with new homes that had been built, a school and other things. But I mean, there's a lot of chat about rail, isn't there? But I suppose again it comes down to finding the sites and how you can make them rail connected. I think when you look at the stats on rail, I haven't looked on the stats on rail in a long time, so I've probably got the numbers wrong. But it's a very small percentage of freight that is moved via rail across the whole country, and even some of the wider industrial sites outside of London where they have got rail siding, actually more freight's probably moved by road from those sites with the rail siding than they are actually with the rail itself. So it's something to look at. I just don't know the answer, to be honest.
I mean, to give an example, so there is a rail siding in Barking which has got connections to Europe, and we've been trying for some time to sort of turn that into a logistics hub. And the problem is, it makes perfect sense. Take an awful lot of traffic off the road, do an interchange facility there, but the delivery networks are so complicated now, it's virtually impossible to unpick them. Effectively, it would only work if you are the likes of DB Cargo or DHL, where you've got a pre-existing logistics network that you can mould to a scheme. Because for someone to try and operate it themselves, there's so many interdependencies. It's a completely different business stream itself. And the problem we're having in Barking is the value is in the clever bits of logistics in terms of packaging and then the transshipment. There's not much cleverness in having a very big car park as a container store. So it's understanding where there's value add. So typically what it should be is you're importing a very heavy product, processing it and adding value and then importing it. Well, what would that be? Is that, to draw an example, is that sort of glassware from Italy that comes into Barking that then gets engraved, that then goes into a high-end hotel? That would be value add, but it's such a sort of minute market whereas rail infrastructure works on aggregates, concrete, engine blocks, cars. It's really difficult to break the granularity of that down to that type of facility. We are trying, but yeah, it's by no means straightforward. And then your first question about local government financing, crikey, sort of everybody in the public sector, I guess, is going through the mill that we all are at the moment in terms of justifying how much money we've spent on development and how much money we're spending on buying for yield, etc. I suppose I've mentioned it before. The reason industrials happened is one, we had design grant and we had the land already. So effectively, we just really having to cover the build cost. Our approach is that we amortise that over a 50-year period. So our payback load is quite soft. These guys who are having to do dividends to shareholders will be a lot more aggressive than that. So that's probably why we've been able to do what we do. And I think probably the overview is it's kind of it's all about timing. And I think so. I've been at BFirst for 5 years, so I've done a cycle of the economy. So I bought a site, I sold it, I doubled my money. Industria is coming out at the other end of that cycle. we're going to have to sit on that for quite some time before it works. But we're a local authority, we're a pension fund, we can afford to do it. So I suppose the message to the public sector has got to be just be consistent and strategic. And the biggest danger we all have is we have a few headwinds and then we get into a fast sale and all the good, clever stuff we've been doing for the last few years just goes out the window. And that's the frustration, it's consistency. And that's kind of how the investment market works. That's what they all want. It's all consistency of approach. We don't like all this up and down stuff. It's just being consistent. So yeah, hard work, but we're all trying.
Was there any more questions from the audience? I've got a raft of Slido questions, and I was just going to suggest that we're not going to get through half of these, unfortunately. We're all going to be here at the front for some time afterwards, so those people that wanted to ask questions I don't get through, please come down and ask them over a glass of water. We might be able to find something stronger later on, but so thank you for those questions. I've got one here. I mean, there's loads here, and they are some really cracking questions. There's one here. How are you future-proofing industrial buildings to ensure that they are fit for purpose, given the pace of change being seen in the market? I mean, I know, just to give you a little bit on that, I mean, we've been looking at a couple of schemes, multi-storey schemes, which could become data centres at some point in the future. So looking at that sort of space to be able to retrofit into a data centre. So, I'll particularly Seagrow and British Land, obviously the buildings you're building are absolutely fit for purpose for industrial users, but are you looking further, and is there going to be conversion to offices, or maybe there's blue sky thinking resi on the top of the top floor of V Park? I mean, have you been looking at that sort of thing as part of it?
You have to future-proof,
Yes.
don't you? So,
Yeah.
for example, at V Park, it's set up now to be 20 different units, multi-let, and we're not planning to allow forklifts, for example, within the building, but we have put in lifts that are capable of taking them. So if at some point in 20 years' time the building was for some reason now single occupied, that future occupier has the ability to use the building as they want. And equally, we've got risers taking services up through the building, but making sure those are as large as possible, because in future, let's say it is life sciences, or as you say, Andy, a data centre, whatever that might be, you're going to need a lot more access to get extraction and plant up to the roof and so on. So in that respect, definitely. Obviously, because it's an industrial building, we've already got substantial floor loading, which will cater to a lot of different uses, but it is building all those things in as much as we can kind of foresee at this point in time.
And yourself?
Yeah, and I think that generally the logistics industry has always built quite flexible buildings. We have lots of different occupier types that might run automation or pallet racking or cold stores, and they all go into a logistics or an industrial building. So we're taking that same approach with the multi-storey. Clearly there are things that we can't deliver, we can't have infinite flexibility, but by keeping the space as big and flexible as possible, not only will it accommodate a lot of industrial logistics uses now, but it probably gives it more scope for what it can be in the future too.
Great. I totally concur with those answers. The clock is ticking down to 1 minute, so I feel like countdown here. But I'm just going to wrap it up. But firstly, just want to say thank you very much for your audience participation. And as I've said already, please do come down and ask the panel some questions. They're all here, and I haven't got through hardly any of them, so apologies. Obviously, this is a real live topic at the moment. It's a very exciting marketplace. And it's quite clear that this type of product is here to stay, especially given the increasing pressures on land, customer demands, and a growing and more dynamic population that Tessa set out right at the beginning. I've no doubt that schemes will evolve as to type and layout, but what is evident that multi-level schemes give great opportunity to demonstrate design best practice, whilst incorporating an increasing number of environmental and social features. Clearly, innovation and an evolving workspace will challenge the norm and will breathe new life into some of our older industrial areas, which was one of the questions that someone's asked, particularly in London. Very excited to see how these schemes evolve over time, and do believe that a wider and more diverse occupier base will see the benefits of these high-rise locations to cluster with like-minded operators, which we also talked about, creating new business communities. Definitely everyone must watch this space, as a lot more to come. Thanks everyone for listening, and thanks again to our fantastic panel. If you could show your appreciation.